successful children and youth through services including counseling, early learning, youth development, domestic violence, and education support for school-aged children. Committed to serving the African American community, Atlantic Street Center provides services and support for all marginalized people. Learn more at AtlanticStreetCenter.org.
Women Empowerment Talk Radio, your roadmap to business success. Tune in every Sunday at 3 p.m. on Rainier Avenue Radio.world, providing resources and sharing motivational experiences from the everyday entrepreneur. Tune in Women Empowerment Talk Radio every Sunday, 3 p.m. on Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
How would COVID vaccines work in your body? Here are 3 things to know. Number 1, a vaccine is basically a training session for the immune system. Vaccines teach the immune system to look for the key features of a virus. So when a virus does show up, it's ready to fight it off. Number 2, a vaccine gives your body a plan to recognize the virus. Then your immune system starts preparing by making antibodies, or fighter cells, that stay in your blood as protection in case the virus tries to invade. What this means is you get immunity against the disease without having to get sick first. Number 3, when enough people's bodies know how to fight off a virus, it has nowhere to go. That slows the spread. When people get a vaccine, we're able to stop the spread quicker and get closer to ending the pandemic. To learn more, go to covidvaccinewa.org. A message from the state of Washington.
You're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Check us out on social media. Facebook and Instagram, Rainier Avenue Radio.world, and on Twitter at Rainier Av Radio.
Welcome to Rainier Avenue Radio. This is Afternoons with Monique, recording live in Seattle, Washington, every Thursday at 1 p.m.
Good afternoon, Seattle. This is Monique Lee from the Afternoons with Monique show. And today I have a very important figure in our city government in the last 3 or 4 years. Actually, she has been an important figure in our city government for quite some time. And today I have the pleasure of inviting our past former chief of police, Ms. Carmen Best, on my show. Please help me welcome to Afternoons with Monique, Chief Carmen Best.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. You know, this is a much anticipated show because since I published the poster for your show, there have been a lot of people commenting on how great it is to hear from you on the show. So let's get started. Allow me to present one new author of the Black in Blue book. Let me just pull up the cover of your book here. It is it's a book that I read with so much anticipation. It's Lessons on Leadership, Breaking Barriers, and Racial Reconciliation, written by our former Chief of Police, Carmen Best. And she is the Chief of Police during a very tumultuous time in our city. So Miss Chief Best, I keep saying that, Chief Best, so you're retired now, and you have been retiring since when?
Yeah, I retired in 2020, so it's been just about a year and a half, and it's gone quickly. It seems like it was just yesterday that I was working and doing the job.
Right. And I understand that you've been with the police force something like 28, 30 years before your retirement.
Yeah, I served for 28 years.
Right. So you went through the rank and you're a fifth generation Seattleite of Washingtonian, am I right?
That's correct.
So I did read some part of your books, almost done, but I was, I enjoy reading too. And as I was reading your book, I know that you are also an avid reader and writer from a very early age. And a lot of the stories that you share in the book is very relatable to a lot of people who love to read and have a passion for something in their life like you. So let us know. So I would love to know, who did you write the book for?
Yeah, I think there's something for almost everybody in there. I really wanted to as I reflected, to share some of my leadership lessons, some of my life stories. We all have a story. We all have different challenges that we've been through. So it really is a book of resilience and hope for the future, but also some practical things to keep in mind when we are confronted with those really challenging situations. So I put it in a story form, but it really is about some of the things that I've learned throughout life that really are applicable currently. We everything that leads us to where we are serves a purpose in moving us forward.
Well, the book is so well written, and I love to read. As I was reading through some of the stories that you share from your childhood and upbringing, I just felt like I get to know you. There's a voice there that, I didn't know you before this, outside of, yes, thank you for pulling that up. Outside of seeing you in the news and on TV, I feel like I can get to know the person Carmen Best. And I love the story that you shared about the mitten with your brother. You have one brother, and now you have two daughters, right?
I have two daughters. I actually have two brothers, but that story was about one of my brothers. And I also have two daughters. They're both adults, and I have two grandchildren.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, you're busy. Not only, run the city, but also as a family person, as a grandmother and mother. Yeah. I love this quote, which, I'm going to save it for a little bit because I love this quote that you wrote in the book about leadership. So I read both the reviews, the positive, the supporters, and the criticism before I read the book. And I just want to see how people perceive the book, whether my personal feeling about it is reflected. And some of the criticism maybe from people who know more than me, but I actually really like the voice of the book and the stories that it told. So and one of the lines I love about in the book about leadership is this one, if I may quote.
Yeah, of course.
um, you wrote that it all starts in the household. We learn the most important leadership lessons during childhood. The only way to change that doesn't work in the only way that change would work in our society is to change the way the only way to change what doesn't work in our society is to change the way we behave behind closed doors. Being a leader is not a part-time uh, job, and it begins and it doesn't begins and ends at work. It's a way of life that must be taken care of, protected, and cherished, even when we think nobody is watching. Because let me tell you a secret, there's always somebody watching, even if it's a 5-year-old boy who's walking to school with his bigger sister and is no longer shivering from the bitter cold in the Pacific Northwest winter thanks to an extra pair of hand-sewn gloves. That passage speaks to me, and I thought I just have to write that down. It's very well written, and to tell the story. Can you tell us? I mean, of course, I read the story, but I love to share with the audience a little bit, an excerpt of your book.
Yeah, well, I'll paraphrase here. It really is just recounting when, as a little girl, I was walking my brother to school in the winter. It was very cold. My mother was at home. My father was deployed overseas because he was in the military. And so she had made us gloves because she couldn't be out. She just had a baby. She couldn't go out. So she actually made us gloves to wear. And it was still so cold that my brother's hands were still cold. So we were walking, we were both, shivering and trying to get to school. So I took my gloves off and gave them to my brother, and so he could cover his hands, so he could have some little extra warmth. And it was just something I did, we were little kids. Because I loved him, he was my brother, and I wanted to do something to help him, and I was the older child there. And while it might seem very basic, it really is that we start learning how to treat people and our leadership and taking the lead and taking responsibility very early on. And some of those things, I remember looking at my brother's face that day and how much he appreciated, those things stay with you. And then you gain, as you get older, knowledge and experience about being kind to other people and thinking through an issue or a problem and finding a solution that might be able to help somebody. So it was one of those memories that stuck with me for a long time.
And in the book, you also shared the story about how you didn't get picked in the top 3 contenders for Police Chief of Seattle in 2018 when you were sending in your application, and how disappointed that was. And it brought you back to your high school day when you ran for student government, and despite your best effort and how well you thought you did not get the job initially. Clearly, during Durkin's administration, initially you did not get the position that you applied for. But how did tell us, how did you eventually got chosen or appointed to become chief of police?
Yeah, that was a lengthy process and quite a bit of ups and downs trying to get there. But I did, in the book, I reflected back to when I did run for student body president and I didn't make it. And the point there was that sometimes, you're not going to get what you want. You're not going to get the outcome you want. That's life, right? And so you have to have resilience and still maintain your confidence and keep going forward. And in this particular instance, I really wanted to be the police chief. I felt like I deserved the opportunity to at least be in the top 3. And I felt like my record and my education and my experience certainly warranted that. But for whatever reason, I wasn't chosen initially to be in that top 3. And it was really through the efforts of so many community members that came forward and really pushed to have me included as one of the folks that they would look at, that really was a catalyst for me being one of the 3 options for police chief after somebody bowed out, earlier. So I was very thankful for that second bite at the apple, so to speak, and that second chance. I didn't let my ego or my pride get in the way of me getting in there and trying to compete again for what I felt was a very, very honorable position and a meaningful position. And it was very challenging. It was very heart-wrenching to not be selected initially when I was trying so hard. But, as it turned out, I had a second opportunity, and I was very appreciative of it.
Right. And, this path to leadership that you gained at the end of your career was not something that is new or recent. I think there is a series of events in your life, and it's a lifetime of cultivating these qualities that started from a very early age and cultivated over the years. And I understand you rose through the rank in the 28 years being with the police force this whole time to get there. So, when you were during the job and jazz, which, we're going to talk about because everybody want to know what's happened during that time that has so much confusion. And I understand there's some litigation that's still going on regarding that period.
Yeah.
But people, want to know, they want to see what's in the book that they could glean from that period. And, I'm so really glad that I have you today on the show to share with us what you can outside of the part that you cannot because it's in litigation about that period where our city government leadership were having such a diverse point of view and conflicting positions. So I'm going to take a quick announcement here. You're on Rainier Avenue Radio. This is Monique Lee from the Afternoons with Monique show. We have Chief Carmen Best, former Seattle Police Chief, on my show today. And we're talking about her new book called Black in Blue, Lessons in Leadership. And it's on Amazon, by the way, and I read it, almost done, but I read enough to have some insight about the interview today. So tell us, there you go. You can find it on Amazon. It's very well reviewed, 4-point-something stars there. Okay, so Chief Best, can you share with us what you can about the whole jazz incidents outside of what we read in the newspapers at the time?
Right. There's so much there to unpack and unfold. And as you mentioned, there's still a lot of litigation. So still a lot of depositions and whatnot being handled. So I don't want to go too far outside the realm of what's already publicly available and in the book. But it was a really trying time for me. It was a really trying time for the entire country. We were going through this racial reconciliation. We had demonstration after demonstration in New York, Minneapolis, Chicago, Seattle, Portland, major cities all across the country dealing with this social reckoning after watching the murder of George Floyd in the streets of Minneapolis, with officers standing by. It was highly tumultuous, highly energizing, in terms of bringing people together. And so everyone was dealing with some of the issues around that. And we were all struggling to comprehend how this actually could happen in the way that it did. I mean, whether you were in law enforcement or not, that was just a tragic thing to see. So all of that is occurring. And then on the heels of that, there was a decision to actually allow the demonstrators to come, much closer to the precinct. In hindsight, I don't know if that was really the best way to do it, and probably should not have done that. But it happened, and at that point, the decision was made to move the stuff out of the precinct by some command people on scene. Totally made sense considering the circumstances, with the full intention that that we'd move back in after the demonstration was over. But unbeknownst to us and totally unforeseeable, people didn't leave, right? They stayed there and they took up the ground, and we really didn't know initially what that was about or what to expect or what was going to be coming forward after that. And then was really the beginning of what they initially called the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, whereby they were, claiming this area as an area of the people, so to speak, even though it was a city block and several city blocks. And then that changed to what was called the Capitol Hill Organized Protest, so CHOP, that's where that came from. And it was several weeks of people occupying the area, but it was a little bit different than the regular Occupy movement in that, they were really focused on, keeping all police out, and there were people who lived there and businesses who were there who were also being affected by that occupation. So it was a very unique occurrence. I don't think anybody else in the country could really say they had dealt with that at that point in that juncture. So we really were trying to figure out ways to work with all the stakeholders, which meant the people there, the city officials and the electeds, who may have had different perspectives than some of the police, the police department on this. Everyone had an interest in seeing it resolved peacefully. But the fact of the matter is that over time, more and more criminal acts were occurring, and it was clear that it really needed to be, taken down. And so, finally, in July, that's what happened.
Right. Is the police precinct, that East Police Precinct now?
The East Precinct.
Right. That's no longer occupied by the police at this point, and now it's being used as another office space. Am I correct?
No, that's not correct. So the precinct is operational and totally functional at this point. After in July, once the area was cleared out, officers were ultimately available to start coming back into the precinct. There needed to be some damage and things like that corrected. And it was once again occupied by police and currently is operating as a fully operational precinct. As a side, one of the critical issues about the police being in that precinct was that the first African-American council member, Sam Smith, worked really hard to have that precinct located in that general vicinity, because at one time there wasn't a police station there, and he felt like, especially at the time that there was so much diversity within the area, that the police services weren't equally applied across the city, and they're supposed to be, according to the city charter. So he fought really hard to make it happen and to put it there. And many people, African-American and others, but certainly many people in the African-American community, wanted to make sure that his legacy of putting that precinct there remained. So there were a lot of interest in making sure that the police were able to provide public safety services out of the East Precinct.
And you are the first Black female chief of police in the city of Seattle. Am I correct?
Yes.
So, this is a very interesting position because you are in a city that is protesting, like many others, Chicago, LA, all over the country. During that time, we had a lot of coordinated effort among the rioters across state lines to have their voice be heard and to make a bark, sort of some noise in the community. And then you in Seattle, which is one of the most active zone with lots of breaking in, lots of department store breakage and looting. We had a lot of upheaval and lawlessness in the city of Seattle at the time, and you're in the leadership position, the highest position at that time. What was that like coming into, or I think you were, I'm not sure what the police, what happened to the police during that time, but I know that you mobilized the force, and I saw in the newspaper a lot of pushback. There you go. A lot of pushback by the police, but eventually that capitulated, that situation, the police capitulated and backed down. What brought on that decision to remove yourself from the zone?
I'm not sure I follow your question. Like, how did they take over that area? Or
well, no, I mean, I know that there was tear gas and there was some show of force there to push back the occupancy of the chas and job leadership. And at one point, it comes to a head, and it was photographed and put in the newspaper, and everybody knows that was a tense situation. International and national newspapers were in town, and I was called to take some of them there. I took some pictures. I know it was a very tense situation, but eventually I felt like the police backed down and allowed the occupants, the rioters or the protesters, to occupy that space for a time. I can't remember, it was 2-3 weeks or a month. So what?
Well, I would say this, just to put that in sequential events, is that there were several protests. The police left the precinct, and that's how protesters were able to, stay within that area and occupy that zone. And during the tear gas and that stuff happened during the protest, which were before the occupation of the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, and the CHOP. So all those things are true, but just a sequencing of how that occurred. And then once they were the area was occupied in the manner that it was, it was really declared sort of a non-cop zone, and police officers were responding to the parameters of the area to take calls for service, and would only go in due to the nature of what was happening when they had a lot of backup, to go within the area, because it really did devolve into, quite a dangerous situation before it was finally eradicated.
And I understand that you were the person that ordered the police to take their presence out of that zone to protect their safety.
Yeah, I mean, we had definitely rules around, how we were going to respond to the zone for safety issues, for sure.
Right. And there were opposing positions from someone else in city government to hold their ground. Wasn't there?
Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by that. Yeah, I'm asking for clarity.
Okay. Well, I actually, a lot of people I talked to, they don't know what happened during that time, because it was kind of kept behind a certain, I don't want to use the word secrecy, but confidentiality veil. So most people don't know, outside of what we read, what goes on in city government that has so many people disagreeing about what to do about that.
Yeah, well, there definitely was a lot of dialogue about what to do about it, and varying opinions about the level of concern. But, at the end of the day, I can only speak for me. I definitely felt like we needed to look to stop the Capitol Hill organized protest, simply because too many people were injured. We had 2 murders that happened. There were assaults, there were robberies. I mean, the press conference, I've given press conferences and talked about those very, bad things that were happening. So we needed to take action. And, that was not an easy thing to do, but it needed to happen for the safety of everyone involved.
Right. And there's more details about the storyline behind the scene, a little bit more than what you see in the newspaper in the book, and we're running out of time. Okay. So, yes, those of you who are curious about what happened during that time and want to follow the story of Chief Carmen Best, Seattle Chief of Police during a very difficult time of Seattle, and we're still recovering from it. Pick up her book, check it out, learn what happened that brought, her to the decision that she made. And I think, unless Mayor Duncan come out with another book, I think you are the person that is closest to the action that can share what happened in the book, Black in Blue, on Amazon.
Yeah, thank you so much, Monique. Thank you for having me, for recounting that situation. I hope people will buy Black and Blue, Lessons on Leadership, Breaking Barriers, and Racial Reconciliation, get some behind-the-scenes information. Love to come back sometime and talk about other issues. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, it's a pleasure having you on Chief Best. You have a great day, Seattle. You're on Afternoons with Monique, Rainier Avenue Radio. We're signing off.